The battle of wizards and warriors continues with iron swords. The evil wizard Malkil will take the shape of the earth, wind, water, and fire. Farewell! The fate of the world is in your hands!
You're listening to the Piercing Wizard podcast, and I'm your host, Ryan Willett. I'm a professional body piercer with 20 years experience. I travel around the world teaching technique and safety classes, and I'm a member of the Association of Professional Piercers. Listen in as I talk to my friends and colleagues about our industry so we can all stay sharp.
All right. Piercing Wizard podcast, motherfuckers. So, introduce yourself, you lovely lass.
Hello. My name is Lola Slider from Forest Piercing in Glasgow, and I am currently with Ryan Willett in Nashua, New Hampshire, North America, planet Earth, the Milky Way, the universe.
The universe.
Yeah.
Not a universe.
The universe.
So we're going to just kind of ramble a little bit. We're going to talk about probably a couple different subjects. We don't really have like a narrative to be too specific. I wanted to talk a little bit about bedside manner and a couple different things that have been on my mind, but you don't want to get too far into it because you're going to be probably doing...
So I've been invited to do a talk APP session at the APP conference this summer about self-care. And when I got the email about that, I was like, do they know who I am? Because for me, I'm not like the,
take care of yourself person.
I think I have a viewpoint on self-care, and maybe that's a good thing,
Yeah.
Like maybe it's a good thing to have an alternate view of self-care beyond what people are used to hearing. So I'm looking forward to taking part in it, but I was a bit worried that I would just ramble on and kind of like exhaust myself of anything I had to say, and then I'd have like nothing to say for that. But
well, it's only 15 minutes, and
yeah.
I don't know how to tell you this delicately, but you talking for more than 15 minutes is usually not much of a challenge.
How dare you?
So you're going to be doing Talk APP, which like if people have never seen that format, it's like similar to like a TED Talk. You go up, you speak, you kind of do like a general lecture, but it's not so much a class. It's a short format thing, usually about 15 minutes.
Yeah, and I think that'll be good for the topics that I want to cover. And I have a pretty clear idea of what it is I like to say, and I talked about it with you a little bit to try and figure out like how do I feel about self-care really and honestly, not like some kind of manufactured version of what self-care should be or what you think it should be.
Like
but
you're not talking
what
about
is
like
it?
bubble baths and candles.
Yeah, I don't even have a bath, you know that.
Yeah.
But and I don't think there's anything wrong with bubble baths and candles. If I had a bath, I would love a bubble bath and some candles. But I feel like we're really focusing too much on bubble baths right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that those aren't valid forms of self-care, but they're not my forms of self-care. So I'm kind of looking forward to sharing some of my thoughts about it and thoughts about how we can reclaim our space in our studios a little bit and in our homes, because without getting too far into it, you and me were talking about how
You and I.
No, me and you. Ryan and I were talking a little bit about how since COVID, we've really, really given over greater and greater chunks of ourselves, and why that is and the effects of that and what causes that. And I definitely have some thoughts about it. Is there anything that you wanted to share about it?
Yeah, I don't want to step on your dick too hard, though. So if I end up, he's so small. If we end up kind of veering too far into what you're thinking about writing,
I'll
let me
pinch
know.
you.
Yeah, well, maybe don't pinch me. You can pinch me verbally.
Okay.
But like before COVID, before lockdowns, before appointment only piercing life for me, my days were a lot more. I don't know, the energy was more spaced out between myself and the clients. There would be, usually multiple clients in the studio at a time. So it was like this bouncing around from person to person, a lot more staff. I had my tattooers still at the time and all this different stuff. It was, the whole beehive of activity kind of cliche. Now, it's very much one-on-one, like literally literally one-on-one sometimes for me, because I don't typically work with a counter person at this point because of reasons. So a lot of times when I'm working on someone, I'm directing 100% of my energy towards them. And I mean like 100% of energy. Like I'm not really keeping a lot for myself, because like when clients come in, it's a lot more definitive. You're going to be here for about 30 minutes. I'm going to make sure that you leave with a good piercing, but also I want you to be happy up front when we're talking about jewelry. I want you to be comfortable when we're preparing for the piercing. I want you to be well informed when we're talking about aftercare. And to do all that stuff well in 30 minutes means that I have to kind of like stick to almost a script. And it's like I feel myself doing the same dad jokes, the same cadence. I'm nailing the same lines like I'm an actor in a play, or like I'm a musician on tour, like doing the same stuff in the same way, because I know it'll have probably a similar positive reaction. And after a while, it grinds me down and grinds me down and grinds me down, because like if I'm not having a good day emotionally or just energy-wise or whatever, it doesn't matter to the clients. They don't come in and like I don't have them fill out a release form that says like, I'm very sad today, I don't want to make jokes with you. It's just like, hey, do you have any allergies? I'm going to go set up your stuff. So like I'm putting out the same level of energy whether I have it or not. And there are lots of days where by the end of a day of, a dozen clients or more, whatever, I go home very drained and very like, I don't have a lot left for myself. So most of my nights are just like sit down on the couch, turn on the PlayStation, and that's the end of the day, So like there really isn't a lot of self-care for me other than when I take days off. And like when my days off are like avoidance days. It's like I don't even want to look at my email because I don't have anything left for anything that falls into work category.
One of the nicest things of it when I visit you is that because we're 5 hours ahead here, everything back home closes relatively early in the day here, because we're 5 hours. Is it 5 hours ahead or 5 hours behind?
Well, you're 5 hours ahead in the UK.
So like by lunchtime here, everything has pretty much closed in the UK.
So
and
if you don't get bad news by noon, you're not going to get bad news.
It's like this amazing feeling of like, oh, nothing bad can happen today because we're past the cutoff for bad news.
Right.
And it's like, it's something I realized because I wake up so much earlier than you. Like I'll get all my work done and it'll get to lunchtime and I'll just feel like I've made it for then I can just enjoy the whole rest of the day. And it's something I don't get back home, which is really nice about being here. But listening to what you said about how you feel and your client interactions and mine, I think one of the things we have in common is that we work solo a lot. And I think that does have an impact, because when you're working with a lot of other people, say you're in a studio with several other piercers, there's always somebody to just kind of like bounce thoughts off and, like roll with things. If you have a bad experience, you can pick each other up. When you don't have that, it just sits with you. And I've had some experiences that have like sat with me for so long because they were so bizarre and so kind of unpleasant for me that it's hard to push past those experiences. And I had a situation, well, I think my biggest fear now with clients isn't that I'll do a bad piercing. Like when I was younger, I was worried I would do a bad piercing. Now I don't worry about that. I worry that someone doesn't vibe with me, air quotes, Like there are situations where when you work one-on-one, someone comes in and for whatever reason, you're just out of sync. Whether it is what you're stepping on each other's words, or you're not, or you make a joke and they don't laugh, or they're being, it's like you're out of sync with each other, and it affects the whole experience. And you try really hard to not let it.
But then there's that desperation hanging in the air.
But then the reality is, if you pierce 1,000 people a year, what are the chances that you're just going to vibe with 1,000 people? And sometimes the most you can do is just do a good job at what your job is. And your job is executing piercings safely and well, being pleasant and kind to people. It's not like immediately connecting with them on a deeply emotional level. And I do think that's an expectation that some people have, especially when they're screening you in advance on the internet. And they're saying, oh, I really want to go to this person, which is amazing. But there's nothing worse than that feeling of somebody hasn't enjoyed their experience as much as they thought they would. And that for me is my biggest fear now. It's not that I'll do a bad job. I know I can do a good job. And in the event that, anything happens that I'm not happy with, I feel confident in being able to navigate that now. Now my biggest fear is that someone's just like, oh, I hated her. And that has happened to me, and it's been the worst piercing I've ever done was not as bad as that feeling of just being like, it's maybe happened to me three times, I would say. 3 times that's happened in like 13 years. Well, probably more people than that have not liked me, but ones that have actually said it or said it to me, that's happened 3 times. And each time it's been like the worst feeling in the world, because I've never gone into someone's place of work and just told them, just so you know, it's you specifically I don't like.
Well, think
it's
about
so
it
hurtful.
like when you go to a restaurant and, like the server is like, they're not having a great day or whatever, but like they do a good job. They bring out your food, they refill your drink, they bring your check on time, all that stuff. So you're just like, well, it was perfectly fine, but it's like, how much can you really expect from people in the service industry? And I think this completely ridiculous precedent has been set because you have piercers who are good at it. And I know you're good at it. I know I can be good at it, but it's like when it feels forced, then that throws everything off. So if you have piercers who are talking online, who are setting this precedent in a way that they're using it as marketing, like, everybody should be able to go into a studio and feel welcomed and feel the energy and feel that someone is at their best and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, when did we move beyond respect your client, do a safe piercing on them, make sure they're well informed, answer their questions? Like, I get that. And like that at a minimum standard is what we're supposed to be doing as a body piercer. But like, you can't force someone to have this like connection or, for the vibe to be right. And like, I'm not trying to say that we should be rude to our customers. That's not at all what I mean. But I think that we're in a dangerous kind of place post-lockdown where we're almost being like dishonest with clients, dishonest with ourselves, and trying to like perform for some of them. Yeah. And when it comes to performance outside of like do a good piercing, it can really be a little bit soul crushing. And I think that that's going to amplify that whole piercer burnout kind of a thing, because it's like, you can't be that 100% of the time. Nobody can. And if you try to like say or act or pretend or trumpet online that everybody should be that all the time, you're setting the clients up just to be disappointed. Because like, if you're doing an excellent service, but you're not in the mood to tell jokes that day, like I had to work the day I found out that my coworker died. Mm-hmm. I had to work all day long. Like, Evan went home, I stayed and covered his appointments, and I had to just like perform and do good piercings, and all I could think about was my friend that died a couple hours ago, and it's like,
I remember that day.
Yeah.
And I remember telling you to go home.
Yeah.
And we don't have to leave this in if you don't want to.
Well, why not be honest?
I remember that day, and I remember saying you have to go home, and you expressing to me that it was going to be more emotional work to phone every client and try and move them and cancel them and try and say something had happened and do that over and over. That was going to be harder than you just putting on a brave face and just doing the actual work, because you had the muscle memory to deal with that. Mm-hmm. And like, in a way, just playing out the day as normal, it's going to be easier than phoning a bunch of clients, some of them that might potentially, be like, oh, I'm not happy that my appointment's being cancelled, and trying to manage that situation.
Well, the reason I knew why it would be a emotional labor is because I don't know how much I want to say, because part of it was an emotional moment between me and Evan. But like, I found out about Rob at like 11 a.m. Evan showed up at 11:45 or 11:30 or whatever. We had whatever conversation we had. Evan went home. The first appointment was 12:15. Right. So I called the first appointment and I was like, hey, I'm sorry, we have to reschedule you. There was an emergency. And they had this tone, because like, they didn't know. I didn't tell them. All they knew was like, they've been waiting for their appointment, and they get to like less than an hour, and then they're told we have to waive it off. And they were just like, oh, all right, I'll reschedule. Yeah. And it's not like I'm going to be like, oh, well, hey, this, but like, I was just like, I can't do that a dozen more times today. So I'm just going to stay here. Evan goes home, takes whatever time he needs, but I'm just going to, like you said, muscle memory through it. And I think I only cried in front of 2 clients that day. Yeah. But anyway, not to go off track, but
things happen like that when you're at work.
Things happen. People have kids, people have families, people have all their other stressors in their lives. And like, if they can come in and they can just like be pleasant and perform their job like to a good level, that should be enough.
Yeah.
If it's that extra cherry on the top of like, they made me laugh, they made me smile, we had this nice connection, I felt warmth, it's like, yes, that's also fantastic, and like that's what I would like to give the majority of my clients. But trying to set a precedent and almost making piercers feel bad when they can't provide that, I think is inappropriate.
I agree. I think that we constantly set the bar higher and higher for ourselves, which is a good thing to always be pushing. But when it comes to the emotional role that we can take on with our customers, like I said, it's completely unsustainable and unrealistic that you think you should have an instant connection with 1,000 different people a year and be able to intuit just in 30 seconds what their needs are without them actually telling you, without them communicating them to you. And we can do little things like I do my silent appointments now, where people can basically request a silent appointment, and I still have to like talk to them to ask for permission and tell them what I'm doing, but it's basically a little box on the form that says I don't feel like chatting today.
Yeah.
So if someone was having a day like you were having and they came in to just get the appointment done and they didn't want somebody like me being like, so what's going on with you, how's your day, like I've been and had things done before, like you know, you go for a massage and someone won't stop asking you about your job and it just ruins the whole thing.
Yeah.
And you're like,
Because you just want to get the massage.
I can't tell you how little I want to talk about my life right now.
Yeah.
Like, so, you know, you can do little things like that, but the expectation that it'll just be the best experience of your life when you walk in the door, that's what scares me the most now, because I know that I can't provide that. What I can do is do a piercing safely and well, and try and be kind and compassionate and communicate as well as possible, but it's still not going to hit the right notes with everybody. It just can't. It's not possible.
Sure. I want to come back to the silent appointment thing in just a minute, but we also forgot that the whole reason we're recording this podcast is to plug our webinar one last time.
Oh, right. Okay. Be cool. Okay. So,
right. No, just
Ryan,
relax.
what are you doing the first Sunday in February?
Well, Lola, I'm glad you asked. I'm actually teaching a webinar.
Really?
With you, actually.
Oh, my God.
Can you believe it?
I can.
And guess what we're going to be talking about?
What?
Jewelry sales.
Jewelry sales.
Jewelry sales.
Jewelry sales.
How
And
amazing
are
is
those
that?
sales going to be ethical or?
Well, you know, I try to aim for ethical, and you know, I'd say it's more of a strategy than like an
Yeah.
expectation.
Okay.
But like, you know, I remember a point in my career where I didn't have internal thread, threadless jewelry, gold jewelry, all those different options.
And what
And
did you do?
Well, see, I was really intimidated to bring those things in because I
Mm-hmm.
just didn't have anyone to teach me different responsible ways that I could do it and
that
to
would
talk about
suck.
budgeting. Yeah. What has been your experience in that? Have you ever been able to give people like sound advice in that category?
Well, I have been known to offer an opinion here or there on the subject. My class, it was originally called Transitioning to Internally Threaded Jewelry, and then I realized I actually mainly use threadless jewelry, so I changed the name to Transitioning Away from External Thread. And what I really like about the class is it's not a technique class. It's not like how to use the jewelry. It's how to talk to clients about it in a way that's going to retain their business. Because when you're using an inferior product and then you transition to using a superior product, it's really hard to say, hey, that thing I sold you before wasn't great, but let me sell you something better now. It damages the trust in that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that we market these new products, superior products that we're trying to deliver to our clients, the way that we market them is incredibly important in retaining their business. If I bought something from someone and I went back a while later and they were like, oh, that's rubbish, let me sell you something better, I would maybe think twice about spending more money there. I would think, well, what if I come back next year and you tell me this is rubbish, you know? So particularly when you're working in an environment, as I was working in when I first started, where 100% of the businesses are using a low-end product, and you're the only one saying, actually, mine is better, it takes a lot more work than people think. It doesn't sell itself initially. You have to be the salesperson for the product. So the class is really educating people on how to communicate that to their clients and also how to pay for it.
Yeah, that's something that I don't want. Like, everything you already said is great. Like the conversational skills that go along with it is great. But I was most impressed when I saw you do the class. I was most impressed by you break it down into a formula that makes sense. Like a lot of people are intimidated where they might say, I have, 100 monies or 1,000 monies to invest.
Yeah.
But like once I buy that product, I don't really know what to do. Like, do I live off that money that I get back from it? Do I
Right.
take it and reinvest it? Like, what do I do with it to help grow my business? And it was really helpful to see you cover that.
Well, it's because I went through that process of literally having like £200 and being like, what can I do with £200? And that was it. Like, entirely external thread to start with and just going from there. And one of the reasons that I wrote the class was because I've been through several jewelry transitions to improve quality, implemented all of them. And on the internet, I would see this recurring argument from piercers that were working in good quality studios selling good quality jewelry saying, just invest in better stock, just invest in better stock. And it would drive me crazy because I would be like, right, there's an assumption there that everyone has fair access to capital, which they don't. Different demographics, different countries, different communities do not have the same access to capital. So this narrative that you can just walk into a bank and say, give me money for this business that doesn't actually exist in the region or country that I live in.
Sure.
I promise it's going to work. It's bananas. So that really bothered me, and I wanted to write something that would actually help people other than just telling them to stop being poor like Paris Hilton.
There are lots of studios where they've had advantages, economic, geographic, whatever advantages that they've had. And sometimes when they're giving advice to other piercers, they kind of they forget that not everybody has those same advantages. I've been just as guilty of it as anybody else. But there are studios where it might just be like a dream for them to be able to pull together $500 to make a neo metal order as an example or whatever. So it's good to have a class like this where people are looking to make that jump. And I've had to make jumps plenty of times going from who cares external to step down was a huge deal for me. And then going from step down to internal and then bringing in everything else. It was a huge deal to me, and I had to do it so slow because I didn't know what I was doing, and I had to trial and error, learn things the hard way, make a lot of financial mistakes, make a lot of inventory level mistakes, all that stuff. So a class like this, I think, can be really helpful for people. My side of it, which I'm still kind of working and polishing, I had a version of this class that I taught a bunch of times over, but I put it together in a slide program where it didn't look as slick. So now I'm redoing the same presentation, but just a nicer version in PowerPoint. Then I'm going to freshen it up and add some new information. But you've seen the system that I use in the studio and basically that Evan and Lily are also using in the studio, and you get really good results. But the thing that I'm really happy with is yes, you get strong sales, you're selling air quotes expensive jewelry, but people come back a second time, a third time, a 10th time because you're very respectful about it. Some of these studios that bring in jewelry, they feel this financial pressure where it's well, I spent X amount of money on this jewelry at conference or, trying out a new company or whatever. And if I don't sell it, I can't pay my bills. So sometimes they end up pushing jewelry a little bit harder than I think customers might want. Sometimes they might end up being yeah, that jewelry, I can make it work there when maybe it's not ideal for an anatomical placement. Or sometimes you just don't read the room correctly. A client might be yeah, I'll get that one. And then they end up spending so much that they might not come back because of buyer's remorse or sticker shock or whatever. But the system, the part of my class, my system, ethical sales strategies, is how you can increase the tickets of your sales, bring up your average dollar or pound or whatever spent in your studio, so that strengthens your studio, gives you an opportunity to compensate your staff a little bit better, but you also respect the clients. You're not making financial decisions for them that they'll regret. They're not going home and being man, I wish I hadn't spent that much, or man, I wish I hadn't gotten this piece when I really just wanted this other one. You're respectful of their choices, so they're going to come back. And when they want something new, whether it's fancy or simple or anywhere in between, they're going to go back to your studio, my studio, whatever. And that's really how you build a studio, is repeat clients. If you get somebody just in once, that's nice. But if you can have somebody coming back and bringing their friends and bringing their friends, that's how you really grow a studio. So that's how I like to present it. And that's going to be my half of it.
Yeah.
So it's going to be Sunday, February 5th. Registration is still open now, and registration will probably close, let's probably say February 1st, just to give people a good target. This is a class that you have to verify for. If you've ever taken a private class from me, whether it's in person or online, or if you've ever taken any of Lola's webinars, you don't have to re-verify. You've already verified in the past. We can just invoice you and it's done. If you haven't taken a private class from us, we're just going to ask you to show something that proves that you work in a studio. We're not picky about it. We'll accept lots of different things. Something as simple as like take a picture of your business card or take a screen grab of your shop's social media that shows you as a piercer, listed as a piercer. We don't need you to like send us a huge amount of documentation, but since we're talking about sales, since we're talking about like all different stuff behind the scenes in a studio, we need to make sure that you're an employee of a studio or a staff member of a studio. So if you're looking to get registered, get verified, sign up for this class, one of the easiest ways to do it is go to ryanpba.com. There's a Google form that you can link to right there, but that Google form has also been shared on both of our social medias a bunch. It's been shared on my Body Art Education by Ryan Willett Facebook page. There's an event listing there. And if all that is too tricky for you, just email me, ryanpba@gmail.com, or you can even really just message one of us on social media and we'll send you the link to get registered and verified. Any thoughts on it?
I'm looking forward to it. It has been revised. My class has been revised as well since I did it for LBP, because as you know, shit just continually happens to me all the time, and I have to learn new ways to save money and make money pretty much constantly. So it has been updated to reflect new ideas and new strategies. And the goal really is that while this is a paid class, it's $100 for both classes altogether. Each one, mine's about an hour and a half. I think yours are usually similar. Is that if you can take even one or two things away from this, you can save so much money by not making every mistake that I have made in the past 13 years. Yeah. So really this is just like here's everything. If I could go back and do it differently, if I could have, hit these notes instead and timed things just a little bit better, here's what worked for me, here's what didn't work for me. I think that it really pays for itself.
Yeah, and like, to kind of pat myself on the back, when I've done this class before, I would get messages, a week or a month after being like, hey, the class already paid for itself because I put your strategies into use in the studio, and just like one good sale can pay for something like this. So also keep in mind that like, the money goes to us to like support us and keep us in business. It's not easy right now, especially with Lola's side in the UK and how insane expenses are getting. So, it goes directly to supporting, you mostly. Anything else related to that?
No, not really. I'm looking forward to doing it.
Yeah, me too. And thanks to the people who have already signed up. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're going to put a lot of work into making it valuable for you.
Yeah, and another aspect of it that we don't usually talk about that much is just you have access to ask any question you want and get an answer. The Q&A is a big portion of this, so if you have questions directly related to your studio, come prepared with questions, ask us something specific, we'll give you a specific answer, we'll give you our opinion and input. So going back to the silent appointments thing, I laughed out loud, literally, when I saw you post about that, because I was like, all my appointments are silent appointments, ideally, because like I'm never like what line of work are you in? Like I've heard people say that that's part of their routine is like, ask them about their work, their day, what they're into, their interests. Like I don't do any of that stuff. Like I have my conversation up front about the jewelry. When they come in, it's like, do you have any questions about aftercare or about anything I'm doing during setup? And if they're like, no, then it's like, okay, then I just wash my hands and set up. Like my conversations in my piercing room are driven by the client. If they want to talk about something, I'm happy to talk about anything. Sometimes I have these long conversations that start with like, hey, I like your pop figure that you have on the shelf, or hey, I like your framed Skyrim map. And then we have a conversation about those things. But I don't really like to be very intrusive about clients and their lives, because if they don't volunteer the information, I don't really want to pull it out of them.
Well, I'm not like, hey, what's going on with you? Have you ever been divorced? Did you have a pet that died that you want to talk about? I'm not like that. But I think part of it is that, like, because I have been commented on in the past as not being particularly warm and bubbly, which I think is a gross mischaracterization. I think that I do try a little harder to make sure people know that I'm not in like a bad mood or like angry, or, you know, I feel like when I'm quiet, people interpret it sometimes as rudeness, whereas when you're quiet, it just seems like you're just being quietly professional, you know? Whereas when I'm quiet, I feel like this tension hangs in the air where people are like, why isn't she talking to me,
It's
you
because
know?
of your furrowed brow.
I can't help that my brow is furrowed.
Also, you know, it's tough to really convey body language and like emotional expression when I'm still wearing a face mask at work, you're still wearing a face mask at work. So it's like really all you see is the eyes.
Yeah.
You got to smize more. That's what you have to do. You have to smize more.
So I think for me, the silent appointment is as much for my benefit as my customers, because going back to that thing of like, if you're just not vibing with someone, if you're just not gelling with someone, they have the option to be like, you know what, I'd rather not talk, let's just do the appointment. And that's totally fine. That I wouldn't ever take offense to. But, you know, trying my best with somebody and having them specifically be like, I didn't like you, that's not good enough, that's like super hurtful. I would rather someone was just like, you know what, I don't want to chat today. I'd be like, cool.
I had this, before COVID, I had this group of 3 friends. And I only allow the person I'm piercing plus 1 friend in my piercing room. The other people have to wait out in the lobby. And now it's really just like the client plus 1, and don't even bring anybody else in the door. But it was, I pierced the first person, and then she was just one of those, like, she was the leader of the group. She was the stand-up comedian of the group, and she was just making her friends laugh, and they were having this great night out, and they were the end of my day. I was very tired, but I was doing everything I thought really well. You know, we picked out great jewelry, I got it sterilized, I'm setting up, I'm doing all this stuff for like an excellent level of piercing. And she was just trying to like tell me these jokes, but they were the ones that were all at my expense, like kind of like needling me, picking at me, kind of making fun of me a little bit, and just like wanting me to laugh it off. And I was just like, I'm gonna go home immediately after your group. Just, can we just, you know? And I didn't vocalize that, but apparently she could tell my body language that I was just not enjoying her humor. And then she just said out loud, she's just like, oh yeah, this guy doesn't like me at all. He's probably gonna like make it hurt a lot more. And in my mind, I was like, oh man, I wish I could. I would never do that. But it was just one of those things where it was just like, haha, and like, how do you come back from that? Do you be like, oh, I've had a really long day? Then it turns into this like, he's not giving us his best. And then if you don't laugh, then it turns into this thing in the air, and it's like, I get it, you know, they probably left unhappy, but with perfect piercings.
Yeah.
But like, it's one of those things where it's like, how much do you really expect? You know, like we've all, again, you know, you've seen a server at a restaurant, and it's like, you can tell that like they just want to give you the thing and collect their money and then continue on with their workday.
Yeah.
No thoughts on that?
No, I was just listening to you. I mean, like, I don't just want to badmouth your clients, but
Well,
I think some people are jerks. They're jerks in restaurants, they're jerks in tattoo studios, they're jerks in piercing street. They just go around being jerks,
the
and there's
tougher thing
nothing
is
there's nothing you can do about it.
the two other people in the group were lovely,
Yeah.
but the leader was terrible.
So, you know, it's a little bit like when, you know, someone's trying to talk to you, like when a guy is trying to talk to you in a queue. I've had this before, where there's somebody usually drunk in a queue in Glasgow, and you're just like, oh, don't see me, like you're in a queue for a bus or for food or for something, and then you ignore them, and then they're like, oh, well, you don't want to talk to me, think you're too good to talk to me, and you're just like, oh god, this is just getting worse, like just let me just, you know, disappear inside myself. And it's like, those people are jerks. There's not a solution to that, you know? Like, I think we're a solution-orientated group, piercers, and that's part of the problem. Whenever something like this happens, you talk about it and people have so many suggestions, and the one suggestion that they ignore is fuck those people. Sometimes the answer is they're being jerks, and all you can do is just be professional, do your job. It's not your job to come up with a solution to people being jerks, you know? It's just one of those things that's going to happen sometimes.
Well, I try to, as I said, you know, most of my appointment space is somewhere around 30 minutes, plus or minus a little bit, depending on what they're getting. And I just try to pace the appointment in a way, and I try to fill the space in a certain way where there isn't really a lot of like awkward dead air, you know? We do the jewelry, and then I set them up with their release form while I'm getting the statum loaded. Once the statum's loaded, I come out front. They're most likely done with their form. Then they come back. Hey, do you have questions? Did you want to talk about, this, that, or whatever? Okay, I'm just going to set up. And while I'm washing my hands, it'll either be like I'm answering their questions, or maybe we can have a little bit of a chat, or maybe we're talking aftercare. But if not, all I have to do is maybe a minute or two of setting up, and then it's like, okay, we're going to get to marking, and you get up, and then it's more interactive, and I'm doing this. And there isn't this like 10-minute period where I'm just sitting there in dead silence with someone else in the room.
I had a funny moment with my apprentice Jordan, who's my counter person and recently started apprenticing. And one of the reasons that he's a very good counter person is he's very warm and friendly and chatty, which sometimes I'm not. So he compliments me brilliantly because he's good at all the things I'm bad at. And so we've started getting him into the piercing room, and I'll have him clean clients, and he'll do like practice marking on them, and if it's good we'll use it, and if it's not, like, I'll remark it, just to try and get his confidence up in that room, like managing clients in that respect, because it does feel different. And I was like, okay, when I do that kind of thing, I like to let him lead and say, I'm just going to pretend I'm not here, and then I'll step in when you either get stuck or when you're done doing what you're doing. And then he was just silent. He was completely silent for like 2 whole minutes. And then I was like, so how are things going with you? How's your day? Because it was just so weird, the 3 of us just in dead silence. And then everything happened. And after the customer left and everything was fine, the customer left, and I was just like, you didn't talk for a really long time. And he was like, I ran out of stuff to say. I used all my stuff out the front of the desk, and then I couldn't think of anything.
Needs more material.
Right. So he like basically used all of his material at the front counter chatting to them, and then he just couldn't think of anything to say. And I was like, not easy, is it? When I'm here by myself, having to fill all the silence.
My best filler is I will just talk aftercare. That's it, And like if somebody's like, oh yeah, I've had pierce before, and I'd be like, okay, cool. Well, I just want to reinforce that you want to do this and do that. So when in doubt, talk about aftercare. Like that's probably my only tip. Is there anything else that you want to talk about? I don't want to step again too much on your talk APP. Mm-hmm. But is there anything else that you want to talk about with that, like boundaries and stuff? I know that like a lot of my non-shop boundaries have been kind of set by what you do, with social media, and like not just instinctively answering every single message from every single avenue. Like you really want to funnel them into the professional avenue, and then you answer that during professional time. Yeah.
That's something that I'm going to get a lot more into at conference. But what I would say, just broad strokes for everybody to hear, is that it's helpful when you stop letting random people that you don't know, including me and including Ryan, it helps when you stop letting random people that you don't know dictate to you what your business should be like, because they're not in your situation, they're not in your demographic, and there are some things that we all share universally as body piercers, and there are others that are actually very specific to certain locations and certain communities that will change from place to place. So I mean, even looking at tipping is a big one. We don't have that in the UK, we have it in the US. So it's like, there are big cultural differences. Even I can see, like when you visit me or when I visit you. And that's why it's so silly that when someone online says something like, I would never do this, and you should always do this. Sometimes it's like, it's a little unrealistic to think that we should all be replicating the exact same business practices. Mm-hmm. Like I don't want to, I'm not going to mention anybody specific, but there are people that I've seen post in forums and things and, make comments that I completely disagree with, but I'm not going to get into an argument online because it just descends into, shit throwing really, really fast. So that's kind of why I'm looking forward to the Talk APP, because it gives you an opportunity to actually like talk and hear each other, without it descending into that kind of circus. Yeah. Because there's a nuance to what you're saying and an emotion to what you're saying that is definitely lost on social media.
Well, how about we change the terminology where instead of people using phrases like, you should always, or I would never, why don't you start saying things like, well, the policy in my studio is blah. Or, my clients seem to respond better to blah. Because, what about the next state over, the next country over, somebody with 10 years more or less experience? They're going to do things differently. You have a completely different market. You have a completely different clientele. If you're talking about the studio down the street, then, a lot of the whole, I would never do that in my studio is really just local marketing. It's you shouldn't go there because I do this here. Try not to transfer that online where you're trying to make yourself look like the best piercer ever, because you're probably harming a lot of piercers out there who are already doing an excellent job, but they're doing it differently from you. So if your client or their client, reads some sort of oh, I heard that you were never supposed to do this in a studio, it can just be harmful unnecessarily.
Right. And Fatma, when you had Fatma on your show, she was talking about home visits. That's something that you or I would never do, but yet it's something that Fatma not only needs to do, but works for her, So it's one of those examples of it's a global community, so it's kind of unrealistic that we hold each other to the same standard, and whoever has the highest standard wins, you know?
It's you know what? I would never accept euro in my studio. It's well, yeah, it's because you're in America.
But there are loads of things like that. We were even talking, I'm not going to get into it because you know how I go off on a tangent.
Do you?
But I have been known to. We were talking just a couple of weeks ago about price displaying, and how in some studios that would be completely out of the question, giving people any sort of indication of what the pricing was before they arrive. In my location, that would be outrageous. And in pretty much all of Europe, there's a legal requirement to make that information transparent and honest, to prevent basically shady business practices.
Bait and switch.
So yeah, exactly. So, but then in America, in lots of studios, they don't view it as a bait and switch. They view it very differently. So it's one of those things where that's something that people will disagree on enormously, but there are very valid arguments on both sides.
I do talk about that quite a bit, actually, in my class, which is going to take place on February 5th, 2023.
Yeah.
But there was a point in my studio where I was flat priced, everything costs X amount. And then when it turned into there's a piercing fee and then a jewelry fee, you don't necessarily want to lock somebody into a price on the phone, because it's well, then what if they come in and they decide that they want to get nicer jewelry or more plain jewelry, and then the price changes. But what I try to do now is I say give them at least a ballpark, so that when they come in, they can be prepared. Some people don't have credit cards. Some people don't do bank transfers. Some people prefer to come in with cash, and they want the appropriate amount of cash. And it's probably more reasonable to give them a range than to give them a specific target. I understand what people are going for when they're oh yeah, never give anybody a price. But you have to look at the reason why some people expect that is because lots of stores have unethical practices where they do something like bait and switch. They make people think that a mattress will cost $200, but when they come in, they're oh yeah, all the 200 ones are gone. We have these mattresses for $500. So that's why being transparent about your prices in at least some form is kind of necessary for some clients, some regions. Maybe not everybody, but I think it does help some people. But I will talk about a lot more of the strategy that goes into it in my class.
If I could just mention one other thing
You can.
about that, which I don't believe is in your class, but if it is, feel free to edit out, is that just if you are one of those studios that's I will not even give a range or an upper limit or a lower limit in advance, you seriously need to examine the credibility of your deposits. And when I say credibility, I mean the right that you have to tell someone they can't have their money back when there was never either a minimum or a maximum term agreed to, because it's hard to foresee a situation where that would be valid. So that's just something else that's worth considering, putting yourself in the client's situation there.
And what you mean is if you have, let's say, a $25 whatever, booking insurance, some sort of a deposit or whatever, then a client comes in and they say I had no idea body piercing would cost $100. I can't afford that. I don't want to get pierced today. And then you're well, fine, but you're not getting your deposit back. That is unethical.
Yeah. And I don't think it's something that would hold up if it was disputed.
No.
So it's just worth thinking about.
Sure.
That's all.
And I do talk, in a lot more detail about how you answer those 20 phone calls you'll get every day where somebody's like, how much is a nostril piercing? And like, I have an answer, I have a strategy, but come to the class and I'll explain it in detail.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk any more about conference prep? Because like there's this, we're in this pocket right now where both of us have to prepare for our 2023.
I want to tell people about the first fucking time I had to teach a class with you at conference.
All right.
Which was before we were dating.
In the US or the UK?
Oh, the US.
Okay.
So we're doing
Baron.
we're doing safe practices again together.
This year.
Me and you and I, Ryan and Lola. And we did safe practices together in
2018?
That was 2019.
2019.
2019. And you didn't tell me anything about the class. Or give me any instructions or talk to me at all pretty much before. And then when I tried to get hold of you at the conference, you were just like, I'm really busy, I can't talk right now. So like I met up with Baron before our class, which I think was on the first day, and it was in the morning. And I got shouted at by a volunteer for not going to the orientation because it was the only time I could sit down and talk to Baron about like, right, well, what are you talking about so I can make sure I'm not talking about the same stuff. I don't think I even saw you till the class. It was terrifying. It was so scary.
Okay, so there's going to be probably at least one or two other people that might listen to this episode or might hear something like that in the future and like laugh hysterically because I've put multiple people in that scenario. When I do safe practices specifically, that's a class that doesn't have a PowerPoint slideshow and it's just all talking. And like, you wouldn't have been assigned to that class. Baron wouldn't have been assigned to that class. Other people don't get assigned to teach that class unless they're a piercer who knows safe practices, whatever that means to them, backwards and forwards. So like, I knew that you were a clean piercer, that you were a safe piercer, and that you probably had some opinions on like what goes into that. And I was just like, yeah, that'll be fine. We'll wing it. We have an hour and a half. And it's like, I knew what I was going to say. I knew the subjects I needed to hit on. But other than that, like...
But I didn't know those things.
Well, you did great.
Thank you.
Yeah, but like that's the other...
because what I had to do was learn everything so that I was like, I'm just going to have to think of a million things to say so that when Baron uses them all and Ryan uses them all, I still have something I can talk about.
Yeah, and you talked about boxes and like organizing your cabinets.
Yeah, because it's the only thing you guys didn't talk about.
Well.
And like when I called you on it and I was like, what, you didn't give me any information about the class. You were like, oh, it's safe practices. Everyone it's on every year. And I was like, I've never been to conference before. I'd never been to conference. I'd never been to Las Vegas. Never been to Planet Hollywood.
Well, I think
that was the first year they did it in Planet Hollywood, wasn't it?
Oh, I don't know. But you did great. And then like for the second session, you knew exactly what the format was. That's the problem with that class is like, the only way where I could have explained it to you, like what it was, is if I had a recording of it and had you watch it, because there is no syllabus, there is no PowerPoint, there is no anything. And like, admittedly at the time, that was when I was like finishing up on the board. I was way too busy to like walk somebody through it.
So I forgive you because the class went fine.
Yeah, it did.
Because I'm awesome.
Yeah, and because I'm there, and like safe practices is always going to be good as long as I'm there to direct traffic.
So in short, if anyone wants to come to safe practices this year, I think that it'll be good because
Are we going to rewrite it start to finish?
Well, I didn't write it originally, so anything that I write will have to be new. And you will definitely talk to me about it beforehand because you're dating me now, so you have to.
Okay, fine. Well, so we're going to be doing spoiler alert, we're going to be doing safe practices again. I'm pretty sure, I'd have to go back and double check, but this might be 10 years of me doing safe practices in the piercing room. So, good to have you in with that fresh perspective. I think we're going to rewrite it. I think we're going to have a little bit more of like maybe not a full-on PowerPoint, but I want to have some slides to help illustrate some things about different studios. And like, I want you to talk a lot more about disposable and, I'll talk about reprocessing and blah, blah, blah. But I think it'll be a really good class. It will feel a little bit tighter because all the classes this year are going to be 1 hour. So probably a little bit less time for like jokes and Q&A, but I think we can nail the info. Mm-hmm. You're doing the Talk APP, on, bedside manner or self-care, all those different things that fall into it. I'm doing a panel, studio owners, with a few other studio owners are basically sharing their perspective on like how they keep the lights on. I'm a little bit worried because like I have previously been a little bit of a pessimist, and this year I'm a little bit more of a doom and gloom monster.
No.
Yeah, believe it. And like, there's plenty of other shit that I haven't even talked about yet. And it's going to be tough for me to go into a panel like that and not just be like, yeah, and don't forget about death, And,
well, look, those are the things that affect people the worst. And it's important for people that are going to hear, somebody who they can relate to talk about those experiences, because those are the things that are going to be the hardest to overcome at work. So, I mean, nobody wants to sit and hear a panel of 3 or 4 or 5 people talk about how brilliant their studios are and how they're just killing it every day and how it's been the best year ever.
Oh, wait, you mean like that. Every other conference ever?
I think that, it's important to have people talk about how hard it's been and how it hasn't all just fallen in their lap, and how that there have been a lot of downs, because in that like urgent scrambling to just expand and get bigger and have even more of a presence and do more work and have more staff, it's important to talk about the sacrifice that's gone into it and the things that haven't worked and the difficulties, so that an image isn't just presented to young piercers and business owners of every day you just killing it, because they're going to have a really unpleasant experience when they learn that it's a fucking shit show almost all the time.
I like the article that you wrote for The Point.
Is that because the picture of it, you can really clearly see my nipples?
I can clearly see your areolas, not just your nipples.
Wasn't me that
it looks like it's
picture.
Painted on.
Well, I can't help.
Let me thank whoever it was that picked it, because
I think it was Kale.
You got a great rack.
Oh.
I don't want to be like too sexist about it, but you got a great rack.
Well, the thing is, like both of those things can be true. I can have nice nipples and write a very thoughtful article. It's not one or the other. It's,
Anyway.
I'm a chameleon.
Yeah. But, you talked about things that you wish you had known when you opened your studio. And, just for anybody who hasn't read it yet, it's free, and it's on the APP's website under the Point, which is their like trade publication. The Point used to be quarterly. Now it's just kind of like, it's a different format. It's more of a blog style format website. But if you've never looked at The Point, go to the APP website under publications. It's all free. You can read it all. It's a fantastic resource. Print media, I think, has fallen a lot to the wayside because of like social media and like video and audio, podcasts, things like that. But The Point has such a wealth of information, and it really shows the growth of the APP and the growth of the overall piercing industry, going from a time when internal threaded jewelry and high quality piercing was definitely even more of a minority than it is today. And that whole progression of like conference growing, the community growing, strong leaders coming and going, and all this different stuff. But really good article there.
I got a nice message from somebody saying they really appreciated the line in it where I wrote, "You can't work harder than someone else's incompetence." Mm-hmm. So I appreciated that.
Well, I like the tone of it, because if you try to pretend like you've only had successes in life, when that other person who could find your failures helpful doesn't have access to that information, when they find their own failures, they're going to feel like overly critical of themselves, because they might see it as like, well, this other piercer, they've never had adversity. Everything's been perfect for them. They've never had to struggle or grow or claw. Their studio is beautiful and they have all these things that I want and I can never get there, and blah, blah, blah. It's like we all struggled through our own failures to find our successes.
Yes. I was just going to say, if that's true, I am one of the most helpful piercers known to man, if we're judging helpfulness by a willingness to share their failures.
Well, I like hearing about your day. I mean, a lot of your days have been like tough to hear lately because of how much adversity you've had to persevere through. But I'm really, I admire you a lot as a business person, and you're very inspiring to me, because like, while I might be a massive success, No, like I have a lot of failures and a lot of things that I beat myself up over, and a lot of times where I don't even want to try anymore. And then, like, seeing someone like you who's still pushing and still like working so hard, like it's really inspiring me to not give up when I find my own struggles.
Well, it helps to have a sense of humor.
It does. It just gives me something to laugh about.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I want you to take me to the movies.
Yeah. What are we going to see again?
Megan?
Megan. Yeah.
I
I don't have high expectations of it.
No.
Yeah.
I'm
but
not,
I don't want to see Avatar.
No, I don't want to go see Avatar.
Yeah. Because I can't have that kind of bladder control. And I hate getting up and having to pee during a movie, especially like a really long ass movie where it's like you come back and you're like, what, that person died? What happened? Anyway. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's stop talking. Again, if you want to register for our class, Sunday, February 5th, all about jewelry sales and, helpful information, you can go to my website, ryanpba.com. You can email me, ryanpba@gmail, or like, any of the other avenues that I've hit you over the head with. Oh, what we haven't talked about?
You want to mention your Patreon?
Yes, thank you. That's very subtle.
Okay, wait. So how are things going over on Patreon?
That's the least organic transition.
That's a very funny story, Ryan, and I'd like to hear more about it. But first, can you tell us about what's happening at Patreon?
.com/RyanPBA?
The very same.
Well, I put out that video about forward nostril piercings, mantis piercings, but I also started recording a new series all about jewelry tips and tricks. I'm going to start trickling that stuff out. I'm not going to have it come out in one giant chunk. I'm going to have it come out in a couple different like grouped things, and I'm going to start by talking about like downsizing. Like, I don't want people to just talk about experience from like, I've been using this stuff for years. Like, try to share information, share education from like when you just started out with a thing and you didn't really have a base level of knowledge for it. So some of these videos are going to be talking about really simplified aspects of like, this is how you do a downsize. When we throw around terms like that, downsizing and wellness checks and whatever, this is what goes into it. If you need to keep a backing in place, and or if you want to just change the backing and reuse a front, if you want to change tops on a surface anchor, if you want to do all these different things that involve maybe tools, maybe just doing it by hand, but jewelry change stuff. I made a bunch of different videos about that I'm going to start trickling out, and those are going to start coming out this month in January of 2023. You recorded a forward helix piercing.
That I did.
All disposable. And you also recorded a really nice little tip and trick about reversing direction with completely disposable blanks without having to use tapers. So I have that. I'll put that together, and that'll probably be next month. I recorded an 8-gauge pubic piercing, which is definitely a rarity. I hardly ever get to do those, so I was really happy to be able to record one, and I'm very happy with how it came out. And then just the other day, I recorded an industrial piercing on a client who wears a hearing aid. And I think sometimes clients with hearing aids might feel self-conscious about getting ear piercings, because if a piercer doesn't have experience with it, they might be like, well, this piercing isn't viable because you wear this device or whatever. But, all you have to do is little tiny tweaks and maybe a little bit of a slightly different position. The industrial piercing came out great. It's not going to interfere with the person's hearing aid. And I got a video of how I marked it, how I pierced it, all those different things. So I think that could be helpful too.
I remember years and years ago, it must have been 10 years ago, I had a client in shopping for jewellery who wore a prosthetic ear. And they would pierce it themselves at home, like their prosthetic ear. They would come in and buy jewellery for it. And I just thought it was so cool that they could have all these ear piercings and never have to deal with healing and never have to be in pain. And they could just
never have to buy saline.
Yeah, and it was one of those things where they were like, oh, I just, I'll pierce it myself at home. It's soft. I can just, push the jewellery through, almost just like the display ears that we have almost. And they would come in and shop for jewellery for their fake ear. And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, that is cool. All right, well, let's wrap it up and we'll go to the movie and hope that it's good.
Yeah.
I don't see myself coming out with many more podcasts over the next few weeks because I don't have any like guests lined up. You're here with me now, and I'm going to see you again next month. So we'll probably record something then. But otherwise, I think I'm going to take it a little bit easy on the podcast over the next few weeks so I can focus on video. Over the holiday season, you focus on your personal lives and the people you care about, and I was taking time for that, which I really, really needed. So, I'll do more podcasts, but when I have something to talk about or somebody to talk about it with. And
I'm right here.
Probably going to be you. So where do you want people to find you on the internet?
Under a damp rock in the forest.
Okay. In the forest piercing in Glasgow, Scotland. All right. You can find me all those places I already said. Maybe sign up for patreon.com/RyanPBA and see what you think.
Or our class.
Or both. Why not both?
I mean, steady on.
Yeah. Thanks. Oh, and one last thing. The APP's online Core Essentials has published. That's only going to be available until March. But the APP's online Core Essentials is available now. There are 8 different classes. Mine is one of them. You can see a digital version of Safe Practices in the Piercing Room that I recorded in my studio. And that's available at safepiercing.org, but only until March of 2023. So don't wait too long. You don't want to miss those classes. There are some really good ones.
Can I say bye in Scottish Gaelic?
I don't know, can you?
Cheery.
That's it?
That's bye, yeah.
2 weeks of Duolingo, and you say cheery?
That's the word.
Okay, all right. Well, cheery.
For more information about the show, visit piercingwizardpodcast.com or like Piercing Wizard Podcast on Facebook. For more info about your host, visit precisionbodyarts.com or search Ryan PBA on Facebook, Instagram, and Tumblr. If you enjoy the show, you can subscribe on iTunes, Apple Podcast, and Google Play. Music by Benny B. Blanco. Show copyright 2017, Precision Body Arts LLC, all rights reserved.
And welcome back. All right, Piercing Wizard Podcast, and we're struggling to find content at this point, but we wanted to mention our class. Just a quick reminder to anyone. Also, what just you say? Let's do a proper intro. Let's start again.
Let's not say we don't have anything to talk about because that's
all the episodes. All right. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and say where you are.
Hi everybody. This is Lola Slider from Forest Piercing, and I am on Ryan Willet's couch in Nashua, New Hampshire, North America, planet Earth, the universe.
Yeah. I don't think you can say the universe because, aren't they all, a universe? Anyway. Milky Way.
That's the galaxy.
The galaxy?
The galaxy's the Milky Way. The Milky Way's in the universe. I'm sorry, Ryan Willet's couch, Nashua, New Hampshire, North America, planet Earth, the Milky Way, the universe.
Okay. So, we're gonna talk about a couple of different things, and you know what? I'm just gonna stop. I'm sorry.
What is it?
It's not working for me.